So you might have heard some of these stories about bodies washing up around Lake Mead, but what's probably more frightening about these stories is why it's happening. I'm standing here today on the banks of the Green River in Utah, and about 60 miles or so to the north of me is the Flaming Gorge, where soon about 500,000 acre-feet of water will literally be moved to Lake Powell because water. And topography, guys. So now we have a run. All right, guys, classic red bed. Water, the lifeline of all living things, pretty much all economies, basically all geologic processes. Water is everything and everywhere, so it seems, even in outer space. But here on Earth, the water we humans can actually use is a bit of a different story.
Most is salt water.
A lot is locked up in glaciers, although they are melting now. Not a good thing. Only a small trickle of this water is actually accessible and usable by us humans. And a lot of those systems, if used and abused, don't exactly recharge for our use in the future. Yet, looking at the state of our waters, you might not think we humans realize how important this stuff is. There's something like 90,000 dams in the US and scores of other dam and diversion projects around the country. Now, some people think that these water dams and diversions are just a symbol of our modern engineering superiority. The other side thinks that this is just a mistaken, short-term, impending failure, and representing really only short-term gains, but huge long-term losses. And indeed, there is a glaring water crisis at hand here in the US. Now, putting aside the list of other inevitable water issues we're facing, like depleting aquifers, I'm looking at you, Ogallala, and groundwater pumping issues, hey there, Cochise County, and failures of dams? Have there been any dam failures? Let's go with Oroville. Today, let's just focus on the infamous Colorado River crisis. The Colorado River begins its journey in Rocky Mountain National Park, Colorado, where it begins a near 1,500-mile journey, all the way from Colorado till it empties into the Gulf of California. Well, at least it used to. The Colorado River Basin impacts nearly all western states. I mean, it impacts all of us, but it directly flows through, or its tributaries flow through, the states of New Mexico and Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Nevada, and California is a part of that too, and down into Mexico. So it has a really big impact on the West, directly. In 1869, John Wesley Powell embarked on an epic journey on the Colorado River. But that journey can't be done any longer, thanks to the damming projects along the river. In fact, American Rivers has labeled the Colorado River as America's #1 endangered river. Once deep red and seemingly thick from the heavy load of suspended matter it carried from the Rockies, now runs as clear as a mountain brook through Marble Canyon. Glen Canyon Dam created an extensive settling basin and sediment trap which will become very red, filled with mud. Grand Canyon park rangers used to say the river was too thick to drink and too thin to plow. Not anymore. But the Colorado River's average annual flow is down about 20%, and it's on track to go down about 50% by 2100. Now, predictions like this have sent folks scrambling to try to figure out when exactly the river flow would be so low and the reservoirs would lower enough that the dams and reservoirs wouldn't be able to produce things like the hydroelectric power for which they were built. Unfortunately, it looks like sooner than later. Some models predict that Lake Powell will reach this level by 2023. Wait, what year is it? Oh yeah. In spring 2022, Lake Powell reached insanely, but predicted, levels. As it approached 3,500 feet, alarm bells were pulled. And this is because at 3,490 feet, critical level, Lake Powell may no longer be able to produce hydroelectric power. One of the main reasons for its existence. So that critical level becomes really important for humans. But there's a lot of other people that might say that a critical level was reached a long time ago. Levels that low mean fun activities like boating might be history.
Now, because of these issues, there are solutions being proposed. They're not exactly fix-alls, but let's take a look at some of the key solutions that are either being proposed or already in action.
Now, some of these solutions might sound a little crazy, and I think it'd be great if we'd have a conversation in the comments about what we think about these solutions, which ones we think would work, and which ones we think might fail. Okay, so let's go over them. Now, there's two main solutions being proposed right now, and a third may be out there, and they get a little wild, so hang in there. The first one is actually what I mentioned, is that they plan to move about 500,000 acre-feet of water from the Flaming Gorge Reservoir to fill Lake Powell. That's what's being proposed in spring 2022. And it's already underway. It's been approved, and the water will be moved over the next year and to fill Lake Powell. And it should increase Lake Powell by, I think, like 10 feet or more. Okay. So that's the first one, and it's already happening. And the second one is actually to keep about 480,000 acre-feet of water in Lake Powell that was scheduled to go to Lake Mead. Kind of robbing Peter to pay Paul here. And if both of these solutions happen, Lake Powell will get about 1 million acre-feet of extra water this year. Okay, so I did mention there was a third option on the table too, right? Now, this one gets a little crazy, but it's actually being considered, and it is to move water via a water diversion project from the Mississippi River out west. But here's why I think these are really only short-term band-aid solutions to a much bigger long-term problem. One, 1 million acre-feet is not as much as you think it is. In fact, Lake Powell has already received over 1 million acre-feet of water. It's already received water from reservoirs like the Flaming Gorge Reservoir, and it's still facing this crisis. Another issue has to do with what's going to happen with water allocation in the years to come. Now, in 1922, there was the Colorado River Pact, which set the foundations for the future use of Colorado River water. And it split the western region into the upper basin, which includes places like Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, etc., and the lower basin, which split the states into those like California, Arizona, and New Mexico, and so on. So let us not also forget about Mexico. But basically, the United States Colorado River Pact said who gets what. And as we have these increasing issues with drought and issues with the reservoirs lowering, we're going to see more issues with how this agreement continues to be adjusted into the future and who claims what water they should get, and maybe even some tensions between the upper and the lower basin states. So that could inevitably lead to what has been labeled water wars. And lastly, there's the big elephant in the room, climate change and the continued multi-decade drought that's already occurring in the Southwest. If you look at the scientific predictions for what's going to happen with the climate change, particularly in the Southwest, we can see that it is inevitably going to be worse, and that's only going to fuel issues with these potential water wars and tensions between states and different industries and sectors, from the housing and development to agriculture. Do we want food? Do we want houses? Do we want sustainable energy projects? There's a whole host of tensions that are going to just get worse over the years to come. Okay, so why can't we just tear down the dams, right? That solves the issue. It's not so easy. There's several issues with just taking down dams. As much as some of us might just want to see them removed if we're having issues with them, it's not as easy as it sounds. One issue is, obviously, people have become dependent on the electricity provided from the dams. So just taking down the dam means we have to find alternative sources of energy for those people, or they go without. Another issue is tearing down the dam means the potential of flooding now, or changing things with the water flow, because it's been altered for a long time in some of these areas. Then there's an issue of silt buildup. What some people might not have thought about is that silt is actually building up behind the dam. These river systems like the Colorado and the Green River have historically moved tremendous amounts of silt and sand. But when the dams were put in, what actually happened is behind the dam, silt has built up, which hasn't helped the whole issue. And there's an issue with flooding. There are cities now that have been built down from the dam. Maybe they shouldn't have been put there, but now they're there. So what do we do?
Plus, ecologically speaking, we don't know if the system will actually go back per se to the way it was before. In fact, climate change is only going to exacerbate the problems that we're already seeing, and a lot of these systems are just put on new trajectories. But that doesn't mean that removing the dam won't result in a healthier ecosystem. In fact, there have been some interesting studies. One particular one came out of a riparian system in Mexico, where they were studying what would happen if the water system was put back closer to the way it historically was. And they had some positive results. They were looking at things like the cottonwood trees, and cottonwoods historically grow along rivers like this. Beautiful riparian ecosystems prospered before. But when the dams were put in, they caused a lot of issues, and invasive species did move in. Things like tamarisks and Russian olives. But most of the problem was just that the systems changed completely. The river flows, the erosional settings, what used to be flooded and not, it all changed. So many of the traditional trees, the ones that are supposed to be there, the native ones, like the cottonwoods, just don't take a hold on these shorelines like they used to. So what they found was actually just simply by putting the river system back, not necessarily removing the invasive species, they left them go. And they still saw that the cottonwoods prospered alongside the invasives. So that showed us that dam removal can actually be successful from an ecological standpoint. And lastly, it's not just one dam. It's not just two dams. There are a lot of dams on the Colorado River, and even more on its tributaries. The whole system has tons of dams. So if we're talking about making a difference by dam removal, we would actually be talking about dam removals. And some other issues to consider when looking at this as short-term or a long-term solution is to think about the fact that along this whole corridor, the population continues to grow. In fact, Phoenix is like the fastest growing city in the nation. There's also the continuation of infrastructure projects, new houses being built, they're filling their pools up, they're doing their lawns, there's campgrounds being put in, so development continues in these areas. Now the question is when will we really feel the tightening up of the water resources in these areas? More people just means increased need for agriculture and food. We talked about problems with groundwater pumping, and the whole climate change. And there's examples of this movement of water from one reservoir to fill Lake Powell as being a little problematic. It's been done in the past, and we haven't exactly solved the issue. So there's a challenge of how long can we just keep taking water from elsewhere, especially if those reservoirs can't provide, which has happened. In 2021, water from the Blue Mesa Reservoir in Colorado contributed to Lake Powell. About 36,000 acre-feet was moved to Lake Powell. But this year, Blue Mesa Reservoir is already too low to release any water for Lake Powell's crisis. Also in 2021, over 100,000 acre-feet of water was moved from the Flaming Gorge Reservoir. And yet, here we are.
Edward Abbey once said of the American arid West, quote, "There is no lack of water here, unless you try to establish a city where no city should be," end quote. Indeed, ecologists can show us plenty of examples of the incredible ways desert life has adapted not only to survive, but thrive in conditions we humans label inhospitable, as they strategically balance their own ephemeral water budgets and know just where and when they can expect water. On the contrary, the expectations for water availability and usage set out in the Colorado River Water Pact and related projections were based on bloated assumptions, based on the wettest period on record, and still failing to truly consider the impacts of uncapped growth amidst unpredictable climate instability.
Hey everybody, thanks for watching. I hope you found that interesting. I really think it's one of the most important stories of our time right now, so it was really important to cover. And I know it will be, the situation will be evolving and changing, and so I'll probably be talking about it a lot more here in the near future. So if you want to see updates on it or related stories and other geologic discussions, then all you need to do is subscribe. I wanted to just mention a few other things related to this that I didn't get to cover in the main discussion. I guess they're kind of more positive twists than some of the things we've already talked about. One of those is that at the bottom of Lake Mead, for the historians out there, you might be interested in knowing that there's apparently a World War II bomber. Well, the Abbey-minded conservationists, I'm sure, are happy to see the demise of the dam, and ecologists are probably super interested in what will happen in the surrounding ecosystems. And finally, archaeologists are going to now have a chance to see some of the ruins and interesting artifacts that were otherwise submerged when the dam was put in. So lots of interesting things going on with the dam situation. So we'll see what happens. Stay tuned. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.